Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I want to talk to you about the latest episode of Loki Season 2. It's called Heart of the TVA. And as it starts, the episode picks up at the end of time, where it left at the end of the last episode, where Miss Minutes shows Renslayer a video of He Who Remains, ordering the erasure of Renslayer and everyone else's memories, which did indeed upset her, as Miss Minutes predicted. When Renslayer asks Miss Minute what they do now, Miss Minute says maybe we don't need him and maybe we never did. Meanwhile, Victor arrives at the TVA and is soon met by Loki, Mobius, Hunter B-17, and Sylvie, who want to take him to the Loom, though he's reluctant to accompany them because he doesn't have any idea whether or not he can trust them. But he does go with them. He's introduced to OB, and everyone realizes that both Victor's and OB's work both followed each other's work like a snake eating his tail, which of course is an Ouroboros. So it was a very cool scene where they talk about, well, I wrote this because of your work on XYZ. Yeah, but I only did that work on XYZ because you wrote the book. So it was like, literally an Ouroboros. So anyway, OB then details his plan to fix the situation, which requires someone to walk down the gangway towards the Loom, as before, in order to introduce a device that will expand the Loom to handle all the branches. And when Mobius says that clearly it has to be Loki, Loki objects, but I'm not sure why, because he's a god, so I don't know, but then he was pruned previously, so I don't know how that can happen either. Anyway, Victor at this point points out that he has a prototype that might make solving the problem a little easier if he and OB can figure out a way to integrate. When Mobius then suggests that they all get some pie while Victor and OB do their work, Sophie takes the piss out of him because she figures he's being callous given what's at stake. Meanwhile, in lockup, Brad tries to dialogue with the imprisoned Minutemen, but it doesn't go well before Hunter B-17 comes in and asks for Dox's help, Dox being the leader of the attempt to blow up all the branches. Sylvie winds up in the automat anyway and has a conversation with Loki, who persuades her to get on board with the plan by talking about how, while it may be easy to burn everything down the way she wants to, they have to do the hard work of trying to fix what's broken and hope that they succeed. And he reminds her that the branch timelines that survived are only surviving because she spared Victor's life and because of the work of OB and Mobius. He also tells her that they have to strive to be better than He Who Remains, to which she says his words sound like he's talking about playing God, to which he responds by pointing out that they are gods, which is a moment we saw in the trailer for Season 2. Renslayer uses the time portal to visit the imprisoned Minutemen with Miss Minutes to appeal to them to help her stop B-17 and help her take control of the TVA. When all of them except Brad hesitate, Miss Minutes activates the machine in the cell and puts them all in one of those shrinkable cubes, and they're all cube shrunk to death. Suddenly, everyone's TemPads stop working as Miss Minutes reinserts herself into the TVA system, and B-17 discovers the cube-shrunken Minutemen. Victor sees Mobius drinking a hot cocoa and asks about the hot cocoa machine, which Mobius has him taken to by one of the Minutemen. And as he's sharing his cocoa with his escort, Brad prunes the escort from behind in a sneak attack before he takes Victor to Renslayer, who asks him where the prototype is on threat of doing him harm. With Victor kidnapped, Mobius, Loki, and everyone mobilized to try to find him. Loki and Sylvie then find themselves in the moment we saw earlier when Loki was helping Obi and Mobius try to fix the Loom, wherein Loki sees himself approaching the elevator as he did at that time near the ringing phone. And he ends up pruning himself, which of course is what sent him where he needed to go to help Mobius previously. He then answers the ringing phone and speaks with OB, who then learns that Miss Minutes is sabotaging everything and says that he can take her out of the system by rebooting it, but that it would make it possible for magic to be used at the TVA when the security systems go down. And that might explain why Loki was afraid of going down the gangway, because without his magic, he wouldn't have the properties of godness to prevent him from dying. I don't know. I'm not sure. But as Miss Minutes is being turned off, she struggles to tell Victor something and only manages to get out, "You'll never be him." Their magic now enabled, Sylvie and Loki confront Brad and magic him so as to take them to where Victor is, at which point Brad prunes Renslayer. They then take Victor to open the Loom, which he does by sticking his head in a device which recognizes him as He Who Remains. He then volunteers to be the one to go in and load and launch the multiplier into the loom so that it'll be able to accommodate branches. But as soon as he tries, he's eviscerated by the temporal radiation along with the multiplayer. Just as everyone realizes what's happened to him, all of time starts to come apart. And that's where the episode ended. So I like this episode quite a bit. I especially like the scene between Loki and Sylvie where Loki is talking about, you have to have hope and you can't just burn everything down and, give up on everything. You have to try to do what you can to fix things, especially when lives are in the balance, which she's receptive to, but from the point of view of being skeptical that it'll work. So she wants to be hopeful. She wants to do the right thing, but she's afraid. And ultimately, she decides to go along with his plan anyway. And it might be because he reminds her, hey, we're gods. So I thought that was just a really good scene. I also like the scene where she's taking the piss out of Mobius because they keep talking about how he doesn't want to know what his life used to be. He doesn't want to face up to what he lost because it might have been something great. And this is something that Mobius has to wrestle with, or probably is wrestling with, in ways that we can't see. And I think by the end, he's probably going to make a decision about that. And I think he's ultimately going to choose to look at what his life used to be. I, once again, loved Victor Timely in this episode. The actor is doing a great job in the part. I know not everyone agrees. I thought that he did an excellent job once again of playing this man who is, awed by the TVA, awed by Ouroboros, who really got everything he knows from He Who Remains, who, may in fact actually be Timely himself. We don't know. Of course, a big hole was poked in that theory when he died at the end of this episode, but I suspect they're going to play with time and buy themselves some more time and undo his death and, try again to make the loom accommodate branches because they don't have another choice. And, like I say, I liked that he really seems interested in saving the TVA and saving the timelines, including the branches. Because if it ends up that he is He Who Remains, it'll be a situation where you realize what you've lost when you lose Victor to whatever impulses turned him into He Who Remains, which is exactly where I think they're going. But maybe I'm wrong and maybe he's already dead. We'll know next week. There are 2 more episodes left. And I think this season has been really good so far. Not everybody likes it. Some people think that, it's just a waste of time or boring or it's not doing anything. And, from episode to episode, that may in fact be true, that not a whole lot gets accomplished from episode to episode. And, that's because it's serialized TV. It's not episodic. You're not going to have a story that has a beginning, middle, and end in each episode. And as a result of that, you might have a whole episode where there's not a lot of narrative progress versus character development and character moments. And we're getting a lot of character moments and character development, which I think is excellent, especially because what this series represents is a piece of the larger MCU. This show isn't supposed to have its own sort of big impact as a standalone entity. It's supposed to have an impact to the larger MCU. It's enriching the MCU. It's filling in parts of the story of the larger MCU, the movies and all of that stuff, especially the future ones that are going to involve Kang and all of that. So if you watch it for what it is, which is a chapter of the MCU as a 12-episode unit, assuming they don't have a 3rd season, then it's doing its job and it's good. It's good storytelling in the sense that it tells part of the story of the larger MCU so that we can understand the whole MCU as a giant piece of media, both stuff we've already seen and stuff we're yet to see. So I think in that context, it's doing its job and it's really good at doing it. It's enriching the overall universe. It isn't necessarily there to be anything impressive as a standalone show. So the fact that maybe it isn't is not a bug. It's not something that should be a source of downing the show or feeling like the show isn't good. So anyway, I'm enjoying the show. I can't wait for next week's episode. I will, of course, be back to do a breakdown and review of that episode once it's released. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.